This is Washington Policy Center's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly of Education. We break down the latest in what's happening in education policy for Washington State and how to create the best future for parents and students. Welcome to this episode. My name is Donald Kimball, and I'm here with our Center for Education Director, Lieve Finna. You're here to bring us up to the latest information nationally and locally on education. So first, let's talk, there's not as much national news, but we do have a little bit that we wanted to mention, so take it away, Lieve.
Yes, so I did notice that Governor DeSantis, who's withdrawn from his quest for the presidency, mentioned that one of the topics he's concerned about and fought for is to end the indoctrination of children by the public schools. And so I think that's important that that issue is rising to that level. And so that's worth noting and worth watching.
Yeah, he obviously has been a pretty big supporter of school choice initiatives and generally allowing parents to have a say in education. So even sort of in his farewell to the presidency race, it's important that he highlights that and brings it to the national conversation. Hopefully it keeps the ball rolling nationally. But of course, we have to focus locally here because there is a lot happening in Washington State, both this week coming up and last week. So before we take a look at what we're going into, last week you testified on a bill that is not directly to do with education, but has some very serious implications for education as well as the broader conversation in Washington. Why don't you talk about that?
Yes, so that was Senate Bill 5427, and we wrote a ledge memo on that, posted it on our website, and sent it out. And that bill would have created a hotline to the Attorney General to report what they call bias incidents. Bias incidents are defined by the bill as expressions, which means verbal statements, and it's tied to hate crimes. And so the original bill, which is still on the website of the Washington State Legislature, created a $2,000 reward for people who were victims of, or for people who for victims of these hate crimes, which would of course create a huge incentive to report, I'm the victim of the hate crime, give me $2,000. But the whole thing is itself a hate crime, I'd say, because it's an attack on the First Amendment. It's a clear attack on the First Amendment, and ironically involving the Attorney General, who is supposed to understand the First Amendment. And so we testified against it. There were a lot of people who testified and appeared against it, unfazed by the topic of race and sex. No longer people fear being called racists and sexist and homophobes by testifying against these efforts to chill free speech and free inquiry. And that's what education is all about. And so that's why I felt compelled to testify about it. I mean, imagine if you have a high school full of kids that where they are they are given an incentive, even if they're not given money, just reporting a friend or someone they're trying to hurt to the Attorney General, and creating, turning in someone for a statement that you don't like, that you're offended by. This is just divisive and a terrible and part of the whole concept and ideology of critical race theory. So that's what I see coming from that ideology that's in the schools, that you teach children to look at one another through the lens of race, and then you create, chill their speech when you speak about race. I thought we were supposed to have a conversation about race. No, we're not going to have a conversation about race, because if you say anything that anyone could perceive to be at all offensive, you could be subject to a report to the state Attorney General. I mean, I just found the whole concept shocking that it even gets this far, that it even gets a hearing, and that we even have to fight this, because it's a basic attack on our democracy, on our system of education, on free inquiry, free thought, the whole thing. So very bad bill.
Yeah,
we'll see what happens.
One of the sort of criticisms we got in releasing this legislative memo, you can go to washingtonpolicy.org, go into our publications tab to find it, was what we were bringing up. One of the criticisms, not the only criticism, mind you, but one of the criticisms was this reward of up to $2,000 per incident. Now, this was stricken from the bill by the time it got to testifying, right? And so then there were all these people coming out saying, oh, look at this fake news, this is not right. But of course, this was the original language of the bill. And so we want to highlight the fact that this was in the original language. This is the idea behind the bill. Now, even if they have removed that reward and that incentive, that's a good step. It doesn't make the rest of the bill okay, though. One of the interesting things that I saw in the testimonies was people were talking about how this would create a safe place for people to report crimes. And there were two notices that I had. One being, well, we already have a place to report crimes, and that's the police. But of course, this would sidestep that because they want to have no burden of evidence to prove that there was an actual crime. And the second thing that's interesting, of course, is that a bias incident, as you pointed out, doesn't even have to have the standard of a crime. It just has to be some sort of expression that someone doesn't like. So, as you mentioned, I can imagine so many scenarios in which, even without a monetary reward, there is incentive, especially for school kids who don't like a teacher, or even coworkers or family members who want to get someone in trouble, and all they have to do is call this hotline. So it seems like a very, very detrimental, damaging thing, both to the society at large, but also specifically within educational institutions where you're supposed to have the engaging ideas clash and differences of opinion heard, so the best idea wins. This completely would fly in the face of that.
Absolutely right. And you said that so well. It's so true. And the fact that they were thinking of a reward shows what their intent is. They're trying to create and divide. And of course, they took it out before the hearing on the bill, but it could come back, as you know, through the process. They could introduce the reward through an amendment when they debate it on the floor. So this is not, just the idea that they're seeking to punish people in this way. And that and like you say, an ancillary thing here is that there is no due process. That's such a good point. I mean, we learn in law school, first semester of law school, you learn about the probable cause that police need to pursue, to pursue possible crimes being committed. Not here. There's no evidentiary requirement. There's no way to clear your name if you've been put on this list, this sort of blacklist of people that speak out in ways that are not approved by the Attorney General, and there's just no definition. So it fails for vagueness. It's unconstitutional, illegal. It's offensive. It's just offensive that anyone bring this up. I really think that the sponsors of this bill should go back and read the First Amendment and read some of the laws out of it. Let's get grounded back in what this country was based on. So free speech, First Amendment for a reason. Anyway, so
well, one of the little things you said there, I kind of like, as a general rule, the more vague a bill is, probably the scarier it is.
Oh, for sure.
Right. And I agree.
and in courts, when courts review laws passed by the government, they can fail for vagueness. Okay, yes. That's a standard that courts apply. And so this is clearly one of those, is unconstitutional bill that would fail for vagueness because it impinges on the civil rights of the people and chills their free speech. So that's the whole idea. I think everyone needs to go back and read George Orwell's novel 1984, because he painted the picture so well. The people in power get control of the speech, then there's only approved speech, and you can only and you start to fear speaking what your truth is. It's only somebody's truth is accepted, but not your truth. I mean, it's so double standard here. Anyway. So
some of these laws do make us all feel like Winston, I will say. So,
yeah.
But before we run out of time, let's move on to what we've got going on this week, because we do have several bills. And unfortunately, akin to this prior bill we've been talking about, which is, going to have the effect of controlling speech or diminishing it, we see some movements in some of these bills towards stripping local control of curriculum and what's being taught. Why don't we talk through that? Although there is a positive bill we're also going to get to, so don't hang your head in shame if you're listening. There is some positive movement as well.
Oh yes. So this week on Tuesday, before the House Education Committee at 4:00, there is a bill, House Bill 2331, which would essentially it's called modifying the requirements of public school instructional and supplemental instructional material. Now, this is a misleading title, because this bill would do, if it passes, it would basically give control to the state superintendent of public instruction over the selection of instructional materials by local school districts. By statute, local school districts, we have 295 school districts in Washington state. They control the instructional materials that they're provided to students in their classrooms. This bill would actually would threaten school districts with a loss of funding if they do not choose materials that the state superintendent approves of with respect to the histories of and contributions of women, minorities, people who practice religions, homosexuals, veterans, and disabled people. So you see what's happening? So they're picking out a class of history and deciding what they want children to know. If that isn't another red flag, I don't know what is. That's what's going to be under discussion this Tuesday, and it's also going to be in the Senate Education Committee on Wednesday morning. It's companion in the Senate, and so that is, they've tried to do this last session. Remember, there was that bill to threaten districts with 20% reduction in funding if they didn't select the instructional materials that the state superintendent likes. So there's a real push, and then there's another bill that they actually did pass in the Senate last week, which is again a control over instructional materials of local school districts. So there's a hard push on a variety of fronts to basically make school districts irrelevant when it comes to the selection of instructional materials. Now, a good bill that is in the front of the House Education Committee the same afternoon is House Bill 2398, which would require parents to be put on these instructional committees, approval committees in the school districts. So they have these committees that select instructional materials, and this bill would require parents to be involved in that. So I think that's a good idea because, of course, parents are the primary, directors of their child's education, and there's a lot of interest in parental rights now because of that parental notification initiative that just was approved last week. I should have mentioned that. That's also been approved. It gathered 420,000 signatures and approved by the Secretary of State. And now that it has been handed over to this legislature to consider, and we'll see if they have a hearing on that bill. We'll see. We have a new legislative memo coming out on that as well. And it would undo, if the legislature does not consider it, it will immediately go on the ballot for the fall. This is Initiative 2081, the Parental Notification Initiative. And that would require parents to be notified about the curriculum materials that are in the school. So it's getting back to that. And also if their children are being referred for medical services outside of school by the school. And if their children are attempting to change their names at school, that parents will be required to be notified, because now we have a rule at the OSPI that requires schools to hide important information happening to their children from their parents. So this is what's giving rise to this outcry from parents. What the heck are you doing here, public schools? These are my children. You can't hide important information from me. So that's really a lot, I know.
Yeah, there is a lot there. So we've got a little bit of time left. I want to ask you a couple of follow-up questions really quickly, as short as you can. On the thing that strikes me about this initiative, would this have a chance of being struck down by the Supreme Court for multiple subject clause or something like that, based on the wide-ranging nature of what the schools have to inform parents about? Could you see that as a possibility? I just tend to think that the Supreme Court likes to strike things down a lot that people vote into place.
I don't think that the Supreme Court has been very consistent in its rulings, for sure. But I think the idea that parents are required to be notified is a single subject, whether it's whatever the subjects are. It's a subcategory, right? So I think it would pass muster, and it actually provides, a great talking point for people running for office. Do you support letting parents know what's happening with kids in the schools or not?
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, just wanted to clarify that. And then we've got about 1 minute left, so as short as you can. When we're talking about the bills that would require parents to be on these instructional committees, and the other bills that would give the superintendent a lot more control over that, one of the criticisms we hear a lot is that parents don't have the same breadth of knowledge that teachers do about these subjects. So why should parents be the ones be in control of all this when they can't teach physics or whatever the issue they might throw at you is, what would your general response be to that? Where, well, no, we need to let the experts determine because only the experts understand rather than the parents.
Well, I would say that the experts have really failed, and the parents can do a better job. You want me to be quick about that? I mean, reading instruction is a case in point. The experts have failed to use the science of reading to teach children how to read. That's why we have so many children failing to be proficient readers in Washington State. So when the experts are failing and the parent, they clearly don't care enough to change their methods, but parents really care about their children and they will do a little reading. I mean, they are educated after all, and you can hire people. You can get your friend down the street to teach physics. Look at homeschools. K through 12 is not that difficult to impart the knowledge that's there. Parents can do it. There's Khan Academy. There's all kinds of online resources available now that we didn't have back in the day. Now we have them. It's so exciting. It's the day for parents to take charge. It's exciting days. You know, Donald, there's been a 42% increase in homeschooling since 2019 in Washington State.
Wow.
Parents can do it.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say the resources available is more than ever, just like you pointed out. And the other thing is, I think when you're talking about these councils, a lot of the times the parents don't need to know the nitty gritty of, say, chemistry or physics to weigh in to say, wait, my kid shouldn't be exposed to this particular ideology that's telling you something that's not related to physics or chemistry. And it's teaching you you're a bad person for being this skin color, or you're a bad person if you don't think history is interpreted this way.
That is such an excellent point, because we're getting back to critical race theory. It's in the schools. It's teaching children they're bad because of the color of their skin. Either if they're white, they're tagged as oppressors, hateful oppressors. If they're brown or black, they are tagged as being unable to succeed in this society because it's a systemically racist society. These are falsehoods, and now they're trying to, introduce more materials and unfortunately, there's a whole industry around this. There's a lot of money around school curriculum, and people are writing false histories of people, of different groups of people, to meet this demand in the public schools. And this is why so many people are pulling the kids out of public education, because it's not being honest. So
yes, exactly. Yeah. So I think you make some great points there. Well, thank you so much, Liev. Make sure to stay tuned with what we are doing. We have lots of publications out that reference bills and things moving through the legislature, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks, Donald.